Then I started to make, yo, master, what's up? You know, you rub my lamp, you don't talk to me, you pull my cord, you don't say nothing.
When the world lost Robin Williams in 2014, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Tributes poured in from fans, actors, and comedians who had grown up inspired by his unmatched energy and kindness. But as the shock slowly faded, a different conversation began to emerge behind the scenes. The people closest to him started asking questions about the painful struggles he had faced in his final months. For years, the full truth remained unclear. Then, more than a decade later, the details from his autopsy began to surface. And what doctors discovered painted a far more disturbing picture than anyone expected. The dark spiral behind the laughter. When Mork and Mindy premiered in 1978, it exploded almost instantly. Audiences were captivated by the strange and lovable alien Mork, played with wild energy by Robin Williams, and his grounded human roommate, Mindy, played by Pam Dawber. The show quickly became a cultural phenomenon, turning Robin into one of the most recognizable faces on television. But like many massive TV hits, the momentum didn't last forever. As the series went on, the writers began shifting the story away from Mork's hilarious struggles to understand human life. Instead, they leaned more heavily into a romantic storyline between Mork and Mindy. The classic "will they or won't they" formula had worked for other shows, but in this case, audiences weren't quite convinced. The charm that had made the show special started to fade, and by the time it ended in 1982, the ratings had taken a noticeable dive. For Robin Williams, the experience was a crash course in the unpredictable nature of fame. One moment, he was the most exciting new star on television, and the next, he was watching the spotlight slowly shift. Behind the scenes, his life was becoming even more chaotic. Filming a sitcom required discipline and a strict schedule, but Robin's growing fame also opened the door to something very different: the late-night comedy club circuit. The success of Mork and Mindy gave him an enormous platform for his stand-up career, eventually leading to the legendary HBO specials that fans still talk about today. But that scene came with its own temptations. Robin usually stayed professional before performances, rarely touching anything before stepping on stage. But after the laughs died down and the adrenaline faded, celebrations often stretched long into the night. In the world of late-night comedy clubs, drugs and alcohol were never far away, and it was easy to get pulled into the atmosphere. Stand-up comedy gave Robin something powerful. It was an outlet for the restless energy that seemed to live inside him. The immediate reaction from a crowd, the roar of laughter, the instant connection, became a kind of fuel. But the comedy world could also be ruthless. It didn't take long before Robin found himself caught in one of the industry's most common controversies. Other comedians began accusing him of borrowing or stealing material from their routines. Whether the claims were fair or not, the accusations created tension. The situation became so uncomfortable that Robin eventually stopped watching other comedians perform altogether, simply to avoid any possibility of conflict. Even with the drama, the comedy scene in Los Angeles offered everything he had been searching for: excitement, creative freedom, and the electric feeling of performing in front of a live audience. And somewhere in the middle of that whirlwind, he also found romance. Robin began dating fellow comedian Elaine Boozler, and for a time the two seemed like a natural match. They shared the same world of late-night shows, traveling gigs, and the unpredictable life of stand-up performers. As Robin's career began accelerating, they even moved in together. But relationships in the fast-moving world of entertainment don't always last. Eventually, the couple went their separate ways. Robin didn't remain single for long. there was someone else he had never completely forgotten. Back in 1976, while living in San Francisco, Robin had met a young woman named Valerie Velarde. At the time, she was working as a waitress while attending school. Their connection had been real, but life pulled them in different directions. A few years later, the spark returned. By 1978, Robin and Valerie had reconnected, and this time the relationship moved quickly. Robin was riding the early wave of fame from Mork and Mindy, and the energy around him was intense. In the middle of all that excitement, he proposed. That June, the two were married in a lavish ceremony. It was a bold step, made at the exact moment Robin's career was exploding. Overnight, he had become a household name, and suddenly, their marriage existed under the glare of worldwide attention. The timing created enormous pressure. The combined success of Mork and Mindy and Robin's growing stand-up reputation transformed him into one of the most famous entertainers in Hollywood. With fame came non-stop attention, especially from fans. Women were constantly drawn to him, fascinated by his humor, charm, and unpredictable personality. Saying no was never one of Robin's strengths. Valerie tried to make the marriage work despite the challenges. Robin's schedule was relentless, bouncing between television production and stand-up performances across the country. At the same time, Hollywood producers were already approaching him with offers for movie roles. One of those offers became his first major leading role on the big screen, the 1980 musical adaptation of Popeye. Expectations were sky-high. With Robin's popularity at its peak, many assumed the film would be a guaranteed hit. Instead, the movie struggled with critics and audiences. What was supposed to be a triumphant leap into film turned into a disappointing flop. For many rising stars, a failure like that could have ended their momentum. But Robin Williams was not a typical rising star. By 1982, he was ready to prove he had real dramatic ability. That opportunity came with the film The World, according to Garp, where he delivered a performance that showed audiences he was capable of far more than rapid-fire comedy. While his professional life was evolving, his personal life was growing increasingly complicated. During this time, Robin had developed a close friendship with fellow comedy legend John Belushi. Their bond was strong, built on shared experiences in the intense world of comedy. But their friendship also unfolded during one of the most notorious party eras in Hollywood history. The early 1980s celebrity scene was fueled by wild nights, heavy drinking, and constant drug use. Belushi was known for pushing those limits even further than most. On one occasion, he took Robin on a chaotic tour through New York's underground punk clubs, introducing him to a gritty nightlife that felt completely foreign. Robin later joked that the experience made him feel like a wide-eyed tourist wandering through another universe. Behind the humor, however, the lifestyle was taking a toll. Both men spent years caught in that fast-moving cycle of alcohol, cocaine, and endless late nights. The energy was thrilling, but it also carried serious risks. Those risks became tragically clear in March of 1982. Late one night at the famous Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles, John Belushi was staying in one of the rooms with a woman named Kathy Smith, who had been supplying him with drugs. Robin Williams stopped by briefly that evening, along with a few other visitors. But something about the situation felt uncomfortable. Robin sensed the mood in the room was off. Instead of staying long, he decided to leave. The next day brought devastating news. After Robin had gone, Smith had prepared a mixture of heroin and cocaine, a deadly combination known as a speedball. She injected one dose into herself and another into Belushi. The comedian never woke up. At just 33 years old, John Belushi was gone. The news shocked Hollywood, and sent waves through the entire entertainment world. For those close to Robin, it also raised frightening questions about how close he himself might have been to the same fate. Pam Dauber, his co-star from Mork and Mindy, was deeply shaken. Concerned about his lifestyle, she confronted him directly and warned him about where that path could lead. The moment stuck with him. Belushi's death became a turning point. For Robin, it wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was a brutal wake-up call. The lifestyle he had been living suddenly felt far more dangerous than exciting. He made a decision that would change his life. Robin quit cocaine and alcohol completely. Instead of the chaotic nightlife, he began searching for healthier ways to channel his energy. That search led him to running, and eventually to cycling. What started as exercise quickly became an obsession. Robin threw himself into the world of competitive cycling with the same passion he brought to comedy. He followed the Tour de France closely and developed friendships with well-known cyclists like Lance Armstrong and Greg LeMond. For him, cycling became more than just a hobby. It turned into a kind of escape. Whenever life felt heavy, he got on his bike and rode. Friends later said those long rides did more than keep him fit. They cleared his head and gave him a healthier outlet to replace the destructive habits he had left behind. And just as he was finding that balance, his career was about to rise to an entirely new level. When Robin finally took over Hollywood. The late 1980s marked a turning point in Robin Williams' career. Up until then, he had spent years trying to prove that he was more than just a fast-talking comedian from television. The opportunity that finally changed everything arrived with a film that had actually been circulating around Hollywood for nearly a decade. The movie was Good Morning, Vietnam. Development on the project had started back in 1979, but for years studios kept passing it around. Nobody seemed quite sure what to do with it. That is, until the script eventually made its way to Robin Williams. The moment he read it, something clicked. He immediately recognized that the role of Adrian Cronauer, a wildly energetic radio DJ entertaining American troops during the Vietnam War, could become the perfect platform to showcase the full range of his talent. And that instinct turned out to be exactly right. Williams didn't just perform the role, he completely transformed it. Many of the film's most memorable moments came from his improvisational genius. The radio broadcasts in the movie, which became iconic, were largely improvised. Williams simply stepped behind the microphone and unleashed his creativity. The result was pure magic. When the movie hit theaters, it exploded. Audiences loved it, critics praised it, and it quickly became one of the highest-grossing films of the year. For Williams personally, the impact was enormous. The performance earned him his first Academy Award nomination and a Golden Globe win. After years of struggling through smaller roles and less memorable films, he had finally proven that he could carry a major movie and deliver serious box office success. On the surface, it looked like Robin Williams had reached the top of the mountain. His name was now recognized around the world. Hollywood studios suddenly wanted him in everything. And at home, his personal life seemed just as strong. He had a wife, a child, and another baby on the way. But success often brings its own pressures. The more someone builds, the more there is to lose. Following the triumph of Good Morning Vietnam, Williams suddenly found himself with the kind of creative freedom most actors only dream about. Directors and studios trusted him. That freedom allowed him to take on roles that proved he was far more than a comedian. He delivered powerful dramatic performances, most famously in Dead Poets Society, where he played an inspiring teacher who encouraged his students to think for themselves. The film showed audiences a quieter, more emotional side of Williams that many had never seen before. At the same time, he began building an incredible connection with younger audiences. Throughout the early 1990s, he starred in a series of films that would become cultural staples for an entire generation. Hook brought him into the world of Peter Pan. Aladdin allowed him to unleash his comedic brilliance as the voice of the genie. And Mrs. Doubtfire turned him into a loving father who disguises himself as a housekeeper just to stay close to his children after a divorce. These films didn't just succeed, they became classics. For millions of kids growing up in the 1990s, Robin Williams wasn't just an actor. He was part of their childhood. But behind the scenes, filmmaking was not always smooth. The production of Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg, turned into a chaotic experience. The set was filled with young actors who often ran wild during filming, and tensions reportedly developed between Spielberg and co-star Julia Roberts. The production schedule slipped far behind, and the entire shoot became stressful. Yet one positive thing did come from the experience: a strong friendship between Williams and Spielberg. Later, when Spielberg began working on Schindler's List, one of the darkest and most emotionally exhausting films of his career, Williams frequently called him just to crack jokes and lift his spirits. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about who Williams was. If someone he cared about was struggling, he tried to help the only way he knew how: through laughter. That same instinct appeared in one of the most touching moments of his life. Williams had attended Juilliard years earlier alongside actor Christopher Reeve, who later became famous for portraying Superman. The two remained close friends for decades. Then, in 1995, tragedy struck when Reeve suffered a horseback riding accident that left him paralyzed. The injury was devastating. A man who had spent years portraying an invincible superhero suddenly faced a future confined to a wheelchair. Reeve fell into deep despair. Williams decided to visit him in the hospital, but he didn't show up as himself. Instead, a strange Russian doctor burst into the room wearing surgical scrubs, loudly claiming he was a proctologist who needed to perform an urgent examination. The absurd character went on and on, complete with a thick accent and ridiculous behavior. Of course, it was Robin Williams. Reeve later admitted that this moment was the first time he had laughed since the accident. That laughter, however strange the method, helped pull him back from the edge of despair. While his career thrived, Williams was also deeply committed to being a father. He had 3 children: Zachary from his first marriage, and Zelda and Cody with Marcia Garces. As his kids grew older, he found himself increasingly drawn to projects they could enjoy. This led him into a complicated relationship with Disney during the making of Aladdin. The studio desperately wanted Williams to voice the genie, believing his personality would bring the character to life. To convince him, Disney animators created test footage using recordings from his old stand-up routines. When Williams saw the genie lip-syncing to his own comedic bits, he was stunned. He agreed to take the role, but under very specific conditions. Williams accepted a much smaller salary than his usual rate, but only if Disney promised not to use his name or likeness to market the film. Part of his reasoning was philosophical. He disliked the idea of movies being used primarily to sell toys to children. Another reason was that he had another film, Toys, releasing around the same time. Disney agreed, but later, the studio broke that promise. While Williams's name technically stayed out of some advertisements, the genie character, and Williams's unmistakable voice, appeared on merchandise everywhere. Toys, fast food promotions, and other products flooded the market. Williams felt betrayed. The conflict severely damaged his relationship with Disney. Ironically, the movie itself became one of the biggest animated hits in history. Williams's genie performance was widely considered the highlight of the film. His improvisation shaped much of the character's dialogue, filling the movie with rapid-fire jokes and pop culture impressions. But the same improvisation created an unusual problem. Because so much of the dialogue had been invented on the spot, the film's screenplay was ultimately rejected for an Academy Award nomination in the Adapted Screenplay category. Still, the movie's success only strengthened Williams's reputation as a performer capable of bringing characters to life in ways few others could. His dedication to roles often bordered on the absurd. While preparing for Mrs. Doubtfire, Williams wanted to see whether his elderly nanny disguise could fool people in real life. So he decided to test it in public. Fully dressed as the character, he walked into a local adult shop and stayed completely in character while asking employees bizarre questions about certain products. The staff eventually realized who he was and threw him out. But not before he successfully completed his strange experiment. Yet behind the humor, Williams also wanted his work to have meaning. During the filming of Patch Adams, where he played a doctor who believed laughter could heal patients, the production collaborated with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Children battling serious illnesses spent time on set and even appeared in scenes filmed in hospital wards. Though critics were not kind to the movie, Williams remained proud of its heart. Another major moment in his career came in 1997 with Good Will Hunting. The film, written by two unknown young actors from Boston, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, quickly became an unexpected sensation. Williams played Sean Maguire, a therapist who guides Damon's troubled genius toward self-understanding. One of the film's most famous scenes involved Sean reminiscing about his late wife's embarrassing habit of passing gas in her sleep. The entire story was improvised by Williams. Damon's laughter during the scene was completely genuine, and even the camera operator struggled to keep the shot steady. The performance earned Williams his long-awaited Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. His acceptance speech was heartfelt and humble, filled with gratitude and a touch of humor. For someone who had come close before, but never won, the moment felt like long overdue recognition. From the outside, Robin Williams appeared unstoppable. But beneath the energy and humor, personal struggles never fully disappeared. For years, he had battled addiction, and the death of his friend John Belushi in the early 1980s had deeply shaken him. Williams often threw himself into work as a way to cope, maintaining an exhausting schedule filled with acting, charity work, family responsibilities, and intense workouts. In 2003, after 2 decades of sobriety, he relapsed and began drinking again. Realizing the danger, he checked into a rehabilitation center in Oregon in 2006. The decision showed courage, but the strain on his personal life had already begun to build. His marriage to Marcia Garces had lasted nearly 20 years. Friends described her not only as his wife, but also as a central figure in his professional life. They ran a production company together, and she helped manage many aspects of his career. But the relapse created deep tension. By 2008, Garces filed for divorce. The separation hit Williams hard. He had rarely spent much time alone in his life. Yet during this difficult period, he unexpectedly met someone new. While visiting an Apple store, he encountered a woman named Susan Schneider. She recognized him, gathered the courage to say hello, and struck up a conversation. The meeting turned into a relationship. Schneider later moved in with Williams, bringing her 2 sons from a previous marriage. In 2011, the couple married. For a while, it seemed like life had finally stabilized again. But not long after the wedding, troubling health issues began to appear. It started with digestive problems and gradually expanded into more alarming symptoms. Tremors in his hands, severe insomnia, anxiety, and growing paranoia. Doctors struggled to determine what was happening. Each potential diagnosis seemed to fall apart as new symptoms emerged. Despite the uncertainty, Williams continued working. Performing had always been his way of coping, yet his body and mind were changing. The lightning-fast thinking that defined his comedy began to slow. Memorizing lines became difficult. Moments of confusion grew more frequent. Eventually, doctors concluded that he was experiencing early signs of Parkinson's disease. For a performer whose entire identity revolved around quick wit and mental agility, the diagnosis was devastating. The skills that had defined his life were becoming harder to access. Those closest to him witnessed the emotional toll. His makeup artist later recalled moments when Williams would break down in tears at the end of a long day. Friends tried to encourage him to return to stand-up comedy, hoping it might rekindle his confidence. But Williams confessed that he no longer knew how to be funny the way he once had. Still, he fought to regain control. He pursued therapy, maintained rigorous exercise routines, and even experimented with hypnosis in hopes of restoring his mental clarity. But the symptoms continued to worsen. By June 2014, he checked himself into a treatment facility again, hoping that structured care might help him regain stability. This time, it was not about addiction. It was about managing the overwhelming physical and psychological effects of his illness. The battle was becoming harder every day. In August 2014, anxiety consumed him to the point where he packed up his watch collection and delivered it to a friend for safekeeping. The fear and paranoia that accompanied his condition had become constant companions. Because his insomnia was so severe, he and Susan had begun sleeping in separate rooms. On the morning of August 11th, Susan noticed his bedroom door remained closed. At first, she felt hopeful, thinking he might finally be getting some rest. But later, when he still had not come out, she went to check on him. Inside the room, she discovered that Robin Williams had taken his own life. The news shocked the world. A man who had spent decades making millions of people laugh had been silently battling a storm that few fully understood. And honestly, the aftermath was just as heartbreaking as the tragedy itself. After 12 years, Robin Williams' Autopsy was finally released, and it's awful. After Robin Williams passed away, tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Fans, actors, comedians, and filmmakers all shared their grief. But buried beneath the countless messages of sympathy were stories that revealed something even more meaningful about the man behind the laughter. People who had worked with him or grown up around him on film sets began sharing quiet moments that had never been public before. One of those stories came from Lisa Jakub, who played Lydia Hillard in Mrs. Doubtfire. During filming, she ran into a serious problem. Her school decided she had missed too many classes because of the production and expelled her. For a young actress, it was a devastating blow. When Robin heard about it, he refused to stay silent. He wrote a passionate letter to the school's administrator, arguing that a student with her level of dedication and talent should be encouraged to learn from real-world opportunities. He believed that experiences like working on a film set could be just as valuable as sitting in a classroom. The school never reversed its decision. But for Lisa, the gesture meant everything. Knowing that someone like Robin Williams had stepped in to defend her became a defining moment in her life. It showed her that the man making everyone laugh on set was also someone who fiercely protected the people around him. Stories like that started appearing everywhere after his passing. Another came from Bradley Pierce, the child actor who played Peter Shepard in Jumanji. Pierce later shared that Robin had been a constant source of encouragement during filming. More importantly, he had quietly helped him confront something much heavier. Pierce struggled with depression as he grew older, and he credits Robin with helping him find the courage to speak openly about it. Robin had been honest about his own battles with addiction and mental health, and that openness created a safe space for others to do the same. For Pierce, Robin wasn't just a co-star. He was a mentor who helped save his life. These kinds of stories revealed something powerful. To the world, Robin Williams was a comedic genius. But to the people who knew him personally, he was also a protector, someone who looked out for others even while carrying his own burdens. His final social media post captured a softer side of him. It was a simple birthday message dedicated to his daughter, Zelda, who had just turned 25. It was a joyful moment, full of pride and love. After his death, Zelda shared a deeply emotional tribute of her own. She quoted the French writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and added a short, heartfelt message about how much she loved and missed her father. Most people responded with compassion and support. But the internet can be a cruel place. A small group of trolls began targeting her with disturbing, manipulated images of her father. The harassment became so overwhelming that she eventually stepped away from social media altogether. What made the situation even more heartbreaking was that Zelda was still trying to process the loss of her father and understand what had truly happened in his final years. She wasn't the only one searching for answers. Robin's wife, Susan Schneider, and the rest of his family were also desperate to understand why the last chapter of his life had been filled with so much confusion and suffering. When doctors conducted the autopsy, they discovered something shocking. For months, Robin had been believed to be struggling primarily with Parkinson's disease. But the examination of his brain revealed something far more complex. Doctors found a large buildup of abnormal protein deposits known as Lewy bodies. 2 months after his death, the Marin County Sheriff's Office released the official autopsy report. For those closest to him, it confirmed some of the struggles they had witnessed, but it also introduced a diagnosis that few people had considered. Robin Williams had been battling Lewy body dementia, often shortened to LBD. The condition is one of the most difficult neurological diseases to diagnose. According to the Alzheimer's Association, it causes a progressive decline in thinking, reasoning, and movement. These microscopic protein deposits slowly damage brain cells, gradually stripping away a person's ability to function normally. Part of what makes LBD so devastating is how easily it can be mistaken for other illnesses. Its symptoms often resemble Parkinson's disease, which is exactly what doctors initially believed Robin was dealing with. Toxicology reports provided additional clarity about the state he was in during his final days. They found medications commonly used to treat depression and Parkinson's symptoms, including levodopa. Caffeine was also present. What they did not find was equally significant. Despite Robin's well-known struggles with addiction earlier in his life, there was no alcohol or illegal drugs in his system. He had been fighting his final battle sober. The autopsy also showed changes in the brain that resembled patterns seen in both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases. Medical experts later suggested that these neurological changes likely affected his behavior and mental state during the final months of his life. Perhaps the most painful detail came from his wife, Susan. She later shared that Robin had seemed relatively calm the night before he passed away. Nothing about the evening suggested the tragedy that would soon follow. For his family, friends, and millions of fans, the loss felt sudden and impossible to comprehend. Years later, Susan Schneider wrote an article in the journal Neurology describing what those final months had actually been like. She titled the piece with a phrase that captured the terrifying nature of the disease: "The terrorist inside her husband's brain." At first, the symptoms appeared manageable. Robin struggled with insomnia, anxiety, heartburn, and intense stress. But slowly, those problems began to spiral into something far more serious. His memory started to slip. For most people, memory loss is frightening. But for a performer whose entire career depended on remembering scripts and delivering precise timing, it was devastating. Robin sought medical help repeatedly, hoping someone could identify the problem and give him relief. Unfortunately, the true cause remained hidden. Scientific researchers later explained that one of the most heartbreaking aspects of Lewy body dementia is that many patients remain aware of their mental decline. Robin could feel his mind changing. That awareness added another layer of fear and frustration to an already painful situation. At one point, he told Susan that he simply wanted to reboot his brain. In 2020, a documentary titled Robin's Wish explored this struggle in greater depth. The film looked closely at the final months of his life and the devastating impact of Lewy body dementia. Doctors featured in the documentary described just how severe Robin's case had been. Dr. Bruce Miller from the University of California, San Francisco, even remarked that the level of neurological damage found during the autopsy was so extensive that it was remarkable Robin had still been able to move or function at all. The documentary itself was Susan's idea. She wanted to raise awareness about Lewy body dementia and help others understand the disease that had affected her husband. More than 1 million people are currently believed to be living with the condition, yet many families still struggle to recognize its symptoms. The project also honored something that had always defined Robin Williams: his desire to help people. In one of their final conversations, he told Susan that he wanted to help others feel less afraid. Even after his passing, however, the story of Robin Williams took another complicated turn. Despite the love he had for his family, a legal conflict eventually emerged between his wife and his 3 children over details of his estate. The dispute became public and, at times, painfully bitter, with accusations and harsh words appearing in court filings before the matter was eventually resolved. It was an unfortunate chapter in the aftermath of his death, one that contrasted sharply with the generosity he had shown throughout his life. Yet there was another story from Robin's past that ended in a far more surprising way. Years earlier, he had famously clashed with Disney during the release of Aladdin. Robin had voiced the unforgettable character of the genie, but he had agreed to the role under one important condition. He did not want his voice used to sell merchandise. When he discovered that Disney was using the genie to promote toys and other products, he felt the studio had violated that agreement. The conflict became serious enough that he refused to return for the film's sequel. Disney made several attempts to repair the relationship. At one point, they even sent him an extremely rare painting by Pablo Picasso as a peace offering. The artwork, worth a fortune, showed Picasso painting himself as Vincent van Gogh. Even that extraordinary gift was not enough to immediately mend the damage. Years later, when new leadership took over at Disney, the situation finally changed. Robin eventually agreed to reconcile with the studio and returned to voice the genie once again. After his death, Disney paid tribute to the man who had brought so much life to one of its most beloved characters. Eric Goldberg, the supervising animator responsible for designing the genie, created a simple but touching sketch of the character in Robin's honor. Alongside the drawing, Disney leadership shared a message recognizing the incredible impact he had on audiences around the world. It served as a reminder that Robin Williams had been more than just a voice actor. Through characters like the genie, the alien Mork, and countless others, he had become part of people's childhoods and memories. In the end, the world didn't just lose a performer, it lost a storyteller, a protector, and a man whose laughter helped millions of people feel a little less alone.